to understand the characters better, to understand the town better, because uh, the whole area, the small town, the Marston house, and I mean, apart from the characters, all these things are characters in their own right, right? So yeah, we are restarting Salem slot, and we will start from uh, the prologue. Maybe we can skip this part, but we have to start from here, okay? And just for the sake of a little bit of simplicity, the what we are going to read in the prologue happens after the story, okay? But since it is just given here as sort of a prequel, okay, a little bit of a sign that okay, something has happened. Now what has happened is the main part of the story. So Abhishek bhaiya, I will be sharing my screen, and as soon as you're cool, you can start.
Fine, fine. So I guess we should start. Chapter 1. Almost everyone thought the man and the boy were father and son. They crossed the country on a rambling southwest line in an old Citroen sedan, keeping mostly to secondary roads, traveling in fits and starts. They stopped in three places along the way before reaching their final destination. First, in Rhode Island, where the tall man with the black hair worked in a textile mill. Then, in Youngstown, Ohio, where he worked for 3 months on a tractor assembly line. And finally, in a small California town near the Mexican border, where he pumped gas and worked at repairing small foreign cars with an amount of success that was, to him, surprising and gratifying. Wherever they stopped, he got a Maine newspaper called the Portland Press Herald and watched it for items concerning a small southern Maine town named Jerusalem's Lot and the surrounding area. There were such items from time to time. He wrote an outline of a novel in motel rooms before they hit Central Falls, Rhode Island, and mailed it to his agent. He had been a mildly successful novelist a million years before, in a time when the darkness had not come over his life. The agent took the outline to his last publisher, who expressed polite interest but no inclination to part with any advance money. Please and thank you, he told the boy as he tore the agent's letter up. We're still free. He said it without too much bitterness and set about the book anyway. The boy did not speak much. His face retained a perpetual pinched look, and his eyes were dark, as if they always scanned some bleak inner horizon. In the diners and gas stations where they stopped along the way, he was polite and nothing more. He didn't seem to want the tall man out of his sight, and the boy seemed nervous even when the man left him to use the bathroom. He refused to talk about the town of Jerusalem's Lot, although the tall man tried to raise the topic from time to time, and would not look at the Portland newspapers the man sometimes deliberately left around. Next page. When the book was written, they were living in a beach cottage off the highway, and they both swam in the Pacific a great deal. It was warmer than the Atlantic and friendlier. It held no memories. The boy began to get very brown. Although they were living well enough to eat 3 square meals a day and keep a solid roof over their heads, the man had begun to feel depressed and doubtful about the life they were living. He was tutoring the boy, and he did not seem to be losing anything in the way of education. The boy was bright and easy about books, as the tall man had been himself. But he didn't think that plotting Salem's law was doing the boy any good. Sometimes at night he screamed in his sleep and thrashed the blankets onto the floor. A letter came from New York. The tall man's agent said that Random House was offering $12,000 in advance, and a book club sale was almost certain. Was it okay? It was. The man quit his job at the gas station, and he and the boy crossed the border. Chapter 2. Los Zapatos, which means the shoes, a name that secretly pleased the man to know him, was a small village not far from the ocean. It was fairly free of tourists. There was no good road, no ocean view. You had to go 5 miles further west to get that. And no historical points of interest. Also, the local cantina was infested with cockroaches, and the only whore was a 50-year-old grandmother. With the estates behind them, an almost unearthly quiet dropped over their lives. Few planes went overhead. There were no turnpikes, and no one owned a proper lawn mower yet to happen for 100 miles. They had a radio, but even that was noise without meaning. The news broadcasts were all in Spanish, which the boy began to pick up, but which remained, and always would, gibberish to the man. All the music seemed to consist of opera. At night, they sometimes got a pop music station from Montreal made frantic made frantic with the accents of Wolfman Jack, but it faded in and out. The only motor within hearing distance was a quaint old roto- rototiller owned by a local farmer. When the wind was right, its irregular burping noise would come to their ears faintly like an uneasy spirit. They drew their water from the well by hand, once or twice a month, not always together. They attended Mass at the small church in town. Neither of them understood the ceremony, but they went all the same. The man found himself sometimes drowsing in the suffocating heat with the steady, familiar rhythms and the voices which gave them tone. One Sunday, the boy came out into the rickety back porch where the man had begun work on a new novel and told him hesitantly that he had spoken to the priest about being taken into the church. The man nodded and asked him if he had enough Spanish to take instructions. The boy said he didn't think it would be a problem. The man made a 40-mile trip once a week to get the Portland, Maine paper, which was always at least a week old and was sometimes yellowed with dog urine. 2 weeks after the boy had told him of his intentions, he found a featured story about Salem's Lot and a Vermont town called Momsen. The tall man's name was mentioned in the course of the story. He left the paper around with no particular hope that the boy would pick it up. The article made him uneasy for a number of reasons. It was not over in Silence Lot yet. The boy came to him a day later with the paper in his hand, hold it open to expose the headline, House Town in Maine. I'm scared, he said. I am, too, the tall man answered. Chapter 3. Headline, Ghost Town in Maine by John Lewis. Jerusalem's Lot. Jerusalem's Lot is a small town east of Cumberland and 20 miles north of Portland. It is not the first town in American history to just dry up and blow away, and will probably not be the last, but it is one of the strangest. Ghost towns are common in the American Southwest, where communities grew up almost overnight around rich gold and silver lodes, and then disappeared almost as rapidly when the veins of ore played out, leaving empty stores and hotels and saloons to rot emptily in desert silence. In New England, the only counterpart to the mysterious emptying of Jerusalem's lot, or Salem's lot as the natives often refer to it, seems to be a small town in Vermont called Momsen. During the summer of 1923, Momsen apparently just dried up and blew away, and all 312 residents went with it. The houses and few small business buildings in the town's center still stand, but since the summer 52 years ago, they have been uninhabited. In some cases, the furnishings had been removed, but in most, the houses were still furnished, as if in the middle of daily life some great wind had blown all the people away. In one house, the table had been set for the evening meal, complete with a centerpiece of long wilted flowers. In another, the covers had been turned down neatly in an upstairs bedroom, as if for sleep. In the local mercantile store, a rotted bolt of cotton cloth was found on the counter, and a price of $1.22 rung up on the cash register. Investigators found almost $50 in the cash drawer untouched. People in the area like to entertain tourists with the story and to hint that the town is haunted. That, they say, is why it has remained empty ever since. A more likely reason is that Momsen is located in a forgotten corner of the state, far from any main road. There is nothing there that could not be duplicated in 100 other towns, except, of course, the Mary Celeste, like mystery of its sudden emptiness. Much the same could be said for Jerusalem's law. In the census of 1970, Salem's lot claimed 1,319 inhabitants, a gain of exactly 67 souls in the 10 years since the previous census. It is a sprawling, comfortable it is a sprawling, comfortable township familiarly called the Lot by its previous inhabitants, where little of any note ever took place. The only thing the oldsters who regularly gathered in the park and around the stove in Crescent's agricultural market had to talk about was the fire of 51, when a carelessly tossed match started one of the largest forest fires in the state's history. If a man wanted to spin out his retirement in a small country town where everyone minded his own business and the big event of any given week was apt to be the ladies' auxiliary bake-off, then the lot would have been a good choice. Demographically, the census of 1970 showed a pattern familiar both to rural sociologists and to the long-time residents of any small Maine town. A lot of old folks, quite a few poor folks, and a lot of young folks who leave the area with their diplomas under their arms, never to return. But little over a year ago, something began to happen in Jerusalem's law that was not usual. People began to drop out of sight. The larger proportion of these, naturally, haven't disappeared in the real sense of the word at all. The Lord's former constable, Parkinson's Gillespie, is living with his sister in Kitchener. Charles James, owner of a gas station across from the drugstore, is now running a repair shop in neighboring Cumberland. Pauline Dickens has moved to Los Angeles, and Rhoda Curtis is working with St. Matthew's Mission in Portland. The list of undisappearances could go on and on. What is mystifying about these wrong people is their unanimous unwillingness or inability to talk about Jerusalem's law and what, if anything, might have happened there. Watkins Gillespie simply looked at this reporter. lit a cigarette, and said, I just decided to leave. Charles James claims he was forced to leave because his business dried up with the town. Pauline Dickens, who worked as a waitress in the excellent cafe for years, never answered this reporter's letter of inquiry. And Mrs. Curls refuses to speak of Salem's lot at all. Some of the missing can be accounted for by educated guesswork and a little research. Lawrence Crockett, a local real estate agent who has disappeared with his wife and daughter, has left a number of questionable business ventures and land deals behind, including one piece of Portland land speculation where the Portland Mall and shopping center is now under construction. The Royce McDougalls, also among the missing, had lost their infant son earlier in the year, and there was little to hold them in town. They might be anywhere. Others fit into the same category. According to State Police Chief Peter McPhee, we have got tracers out on a great many people from Jerusalem's lot. But that isn't the only main town where people have dropped out of sight. Royce McDougall, for instance, left owing money to one bank and two finance companies. In my judgment, he was just a fly by nighter who decided to get out from under. Someday, this year or next, he will use one of those credit cards he's got in his wallet, and the repossession men will land on him with both feet. In America, missing persons are as natural as cherry pie. We are living in an automobile oriented society. People pick up stakes and move on every 2 or 3 years. Sometimes they forget to leave a forwarding address, especially the deadbeats. Yet, for all the hard headed practicality of Captain McPhee's words, there are unanswered questions in Jerusalem lot. Henry Petrie and his wife and son are gone, and Mr. Petrie, a Prudential Insurance Company executive, could hardly be called a deadbeat. The local mortician, the local librarian, and the local beautician are also in the dead letter five. This list is of a disquieting length. In the surrounding towns, the whispering campaign, that is the beginning of legend, has already begun. Salem's lot is reputed to be haunted. Sometimes colored lights are reported hovering over the central main power lines that bisect the township. And if you suggest that the inhabitants of the lot have been carried out by UFOs, no one will laugh. There has been some talk of a dark coven of young people who are practicing the black mass in town and perhaps brought the wrath of God Himself on the namesake of the Holy Land's holiest city. Others, of a less supernatural bent, remember the young men who disappeared in the Houston, Texas area some 3 years ago, only to be discovered in grisly mass graves. An actual visit to Salem's lot makes much talk seem less wild. There is not one business left open. The last one to go under was Spencer's Sundries and Pharmacy, which closed its doors in January. Crossen's agriculture store, the hardware store, Barlow and Straker's furniture shop, the excellent cafe, and even the municipal building are all boarded up. The new grammar school is empty, and so is the Tri-Town Consolidated High School, built in the lot in 1967. The school furnishings and the books have been moved to make do facilities in Cumberland pending a referendum vote in the other towns of the school district. But seems that no children from Salem's lot will be in attendance when a new school year begins. There are there are no children, only abandoned shops and stores, deserted houses, overgrown lawns, deserted streets, and back roads. Some of the other people that the state police would like to locate or at least hear from include John Groggins, pastor of the Jerusalem's Lot Methodist Church, Father Donald Callahan, parish priest of St. Andrews, Mabel Wars, a local widow who was prominent in Salem's Lot Church and social functions, Lester and Harriet Durham, a local couple who both worked at Gates Mill and weaving, Eva Miller, who ran a local boarding house. Chapter 4. 2 months after the newspaper article, the boy was taken into the church. He made his first confession and confessed everything. Chapter 5. The village priest was an old man with white hair and a face seamed into a net of wrinkles. His eyes peered out of his sun-beaten face with surprising light and avidity. They were blue eyes, very Irish. When the tall man arrived at his house, he was sitting on the porch and drinking tea. A man in a city suit stood beside him. The man's hair was parted in the middle and greased in a manner that reminded the tall man of photograph portraits from the 1890s. The man said stiffly, I am Jesus de la Rey. Father Grayson has asked me to interpret as he has no English. Father Grayson has done my family a great service, which I may not mention. My lips are likewise sealed in the matter he wishes to discuss. Is it agreeable to you? Yes. He shook Munoz's hand and then Grayson's. Grayson replied in Spanish and smiled. He had only 5 teeth left in his jaw, but the smile was sunny and glad. He asks, would you like a cup of tea? It is green tea. Very, very cooling. That would be lovely. When the amenities had passed among them, the priest said, the boy is not your son. No, he made a strange confession. In fact, I have never heard a stranger confession in all my days of the priesthood. That does not surprise me. He wept, Father Graken said, sipping his tea. It was a deep and terrible weeping. It came from the cellar of his soul. Must I ask the question this confession raises in my heart? No, the tall man said evenly. You don't. He's telling the truth. Graken was nodding even before Munoz translated, and his face had grown grave. He leaned forward with his hands clasped between his knees and spoke for a long time. Munoz listened intently, his face carefully expressionless. When the priest finished, Munoz said, he says, there are strange things in the world. 40 years ago, a peasant from Algranions brought him a lizard that screamed as though it were a woman. He had seen a man with stigmata, the marks of our Lord's passion, and this man bled from his hand and feet on Good Friday. He says this is an awful thing, a dark thing. It is serious for you and the boy, particularly for the boy. It is eating him up. He says, Reagan spoke again, briefly. He asks if you understand what you have done in this new Jerusalem. Jerusalem's Lord. The tall man said, yes, I understand. Reagan spoke again. He asks what you intend to do about it. The tall man shook his head very slowly. I don't know. Reagan spoke again. He says he will pray for you. Chapter 6. A week later, he awoke sweating from a nightmare and called out the boy's name. I'm going back, he said. The boy paled beneath his tie. Can you come with me? The man asked. Do you love me? Yes, God, yes. The boy began to weep, and the tall man held him. Chapter 7. Still, there was no sleep for him. Faces lurked in the shadows, swirling up at him like faces obscured in snow, and the wind blew an overhanging tree limb against the roof. He jumped. Jerusalem's locked. He closed his eyes and put his arm across them, and it all began to come back. He could almost see the glass paper, the kind that will make a tiny blizzard when you shake it. Salem's Lot. I guess this is Maston House.
Yes, yes, yes. This is the Maston house. Yes, and all these houses, one of these houses will be sheltering our main character and his love interest.
Part 1. The Maston House. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. Shirley's action. This quote has been taken from The Haunting of Hill House. Chapter 1. Ben. By the time he had passed Portland, going, going north on the turnpike, Ben Marks had begun to feel a not unpleasurable tingle of excitement in his belly. It was September 5, 1975, and summer was enjoying her final grand fling. The trees were bursting with green. The sky was a high, soft blue, and just over the Falmouth town line he saw two boys walking a road parallel to the expressway with fishing rods settled on their shoulders like carbines. He switched to the travel lane, slowed to the minimum turnpike road speed, and began to look for anything that would jog his memory. There was nothing at first, and he tried to caution himself against almost sure disappointment. You were 9 then. That's 25 years of water under the bridge. Places change, like in those days, the four-lane 295 hadn't existed. If you wanted to go to Portland from the lot, you went out Route 12 to Falmouth and then got on number 1. Time had marched on. Stop that shit. But it was hard to stop. It was hard to stop when a big BSS cycle with jacked handlebars suddenly rolled past him in the passing lane. Kid in a t-shirt driving, a girl in a red cloth jacket and huge mirror-lensed sunglasses riding pillion behind him. They cut in a little too quickly and he overreacted, jamming on his brakes and laying both hands on the horn. The PSA sped up, belching blue smoke from its exhaust, and the girl jabbed her middle finger back at him. He resumed speed, wishing for a cigarette. His hands were trembling slightly. The PSA was almost out of sight now, moving fast. The kids, the goddamn kids. Memories tried to crowd in on him. Memories of a more recent vintage. He pushed them away. He hadn't been on a motorcycle in 2 years. He planned never to ride on one again. A flash of red caught his eye off to the left, and when he glanced that way, he felt a burst of pleasure and recognition. A large red barn stood on a hill far across a rising field of timothy and clover. A barn with a cupola painted white. Even at this distance, he could see the sun gleam on the weather vane atop that cupola. It had been there then and was still here now. It looked exactly the same. Maybe it was going to be all right after all. Then the trees blotted out. As the turnpike centered Cumberland, more and more things began to seem familiar. He passed over the Royal River, where they had fished for steelies and pickerel as boys, past a brief, flickering view of Cumberland Village to the trees in the distance. The Cumberland Water Tower, with its huge slogan painted across the side, "Keep Maine Green." Aunt Cindy had always said someone should bring money into that. His original sense of excitement grew, and he began to speed up, watching for the sign. It came twinkling up out of the distance in reflectorized green 5 miles later. Route 12, Jerusalem slot, Cumberland, CTR. A sudden blackness came over him, dosing his good spirits like sand on fire. He had been subject to these since his mind tried to speak Miranda's name, and he would not let it. The bad time, and was used to fending them off. But this one swept over him with a savage power that was dismaying. What was he doing? Coming back to a town where he had lived for 4 years as a boy, trying to recapture something that was irrevocably lost. What magic could he expect to recapture by walking roads that he had once walked as a boy and were probably asphalted and straightened and locked off and littered with tourist beer cans? The magic was gone, both white and black. It had all gone down the chutes on that night when the motorcycle had gone out of control. And there was the yellow moving van, growing and growing. His wife, Miranda's scream, cut off with sudden finality when the exit came up on his right, and for a moment he considered driving right past it, continuing on to Chamberlain or Livingston, stopping for lunch, and then turning around and going back. But back where? Home? That was a laugh. If there was a home, it had been here, even if it had only been 4 years. It was his. He signaled, slowed the citron, and went up the ramp toward the top, where the turnpike ramp joined Route 12, which became Zweintner Avenue closer to town. He glanced up towards the horizon. What he saw there made him jam the brakes on with both feet. The citron shuddered to a stop and stopped. The trees, mostly pine and spruce, rose in gentle slopes toward the east, seeming to almost proud against the sky at the limit of vision. From here, town was not visible. Only the trees, and in the distance, where those trees rose against the sky, the peaked gabled roof of the Marston house. He gazed at it, fascinated. Warring emotions crossed his face with kaleidoscopic swiftness. Still here, he murmured aloud, "My God." He looked down at his arms. They had broken out in goose flesh. I should call it, I think, what is this, chapter 2 or section 2?
This would be section 2 or part 2, you can say. I think section
Okay.
would be better. I think part it takes me.
Section 2, yes, yes. I think it is
Yes,
section 2.
right, right, right.
So, section 2 of chapter 1. He deliberately skirted town, crossing into Cumberland, and then coming back into Salem slot from the west, taking the Burns Road. He was amazed by how little things had changed out here. There were few new houses he didn't remember. There was a tavern called Dell's just over the town line, and a pair of fresh gravel quarries. A good deal of the hardwood had been purged over, but the old tin sign pointing the way to the town dump was still there, and the road itself was still unpaved, full of chuck holes and washboards. And you could see Schoolyard Hill through the slash in the trees where the central main power pylons ran on a northwest to southeast line. The Griffin farm was still there, although the barn had been enlarged. He, next page, he wondered if they still bottled and sold their own milk. The logo had been a smiling cow under the name brand Sunshine Milk from the Griffin Farms. He smiled. He had splashed a lot of that milk on his cornflakes at Aunt Cindy's house. He turned left onto the Brooks Road, past the wrought iron gates and the low fieldstone walls surrounding Harmony Hill Cemetery, and then went down the steep grade and started up the far side, the side known as Marston's Hill. At the top, trees fell away on both sides of the road. On the right, you could look right down the town proper, Ben's first view of it. On the left, the Marston house. He pulled over and got out of the car. It was just the same. There was no difference. Not at all. He might have last seen it yesterday. The witchgrass grew wild and tall in the front yard, obscuring the old frost-heaped flagstones that led to the porch. Chirring crickets sang in it, and he could see grasshoppers jumping in erratic parabolas. The house itself looked toward town. It was huge and rambling and shagging, its windows haphazardly boarded shut, giving it that sinister look of all old houses that have been empty for a long time. The paint had been weathered away, giving the house a uniform grey look. Windstorms had ripped many of the shingles off, and a heavy snowfall had punched in. the west corner of the main roof, giving it a slumped, hunched look. A tattered no trespassing sign was nailed to the right hand in a well post. He felt a strong urge to walk up that overgrown path, past the crickets and hoppers that would jump around his shoes, climb the porch, and peek between the haphazard boards into the hallway or the front room. Perhaps try the front door if it was unlocked to go in. He swallowed and stared up at the house, almost hypnotized, stared back at him with idiot indifference. You walked down the hall, smelling wet plaster and rotting wallpaper, and mice would skitter in the walls. There would still be a lot of junk lying around, and you might pick something up, paperweight maybe, and put it in your pocket. Then, at the end of the hall, instead of going through into the kitchen, you could turn left and go up the stairs, your feet gritting in the plaster dust which had shifted down from the ceiling over the years. There were 14 steps, exactly 14, but the top one was smaller, out of proportion, as if it had been added to avoid the evil number. At the top of the stairs, you stand on the landing, looking down the hall toward a closed door. And if you walk down the hall toward it, watching as if from outside yourself, as the door gets closer and larger, you can reach out your hand and put it on the tarnished silver knob. He turned away from the house, a straw dry whistle of air slipping from his mouth. Not yet. Later, perhaps, but not yet. For now, it was enough to know that all of that was still here. It had waited for him. He put his hands on the hood of his car and looked out over the town. He could find out down there who was handling the Maston house and perhaps lease it. That the kitchen would make an adequate writing room and he could bunk down in the front parlor. But he wouldn't allow himself to go upstairs, not unless it had to be done. He got in his car, started it, and drove down the hill to Jerusalem's lot.
I guess we can stop here if that is okay with everyone. Abhishek Bhaiya, I think you have a sore throat. I would suggest if you could have some water. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that
Thank
amazing reading. And yeah, guys, this is the reason why I feel that Abhishek Bhaiya should definitely read this book, narrated to us. And not only that, another reason for restarting the book is the fact that, well, there are more than a few reasons. Abhishek Bhaiya's voice being one of them. The other one is that many of you joined the book a little bit haphazardly. So it might have been the case that, you might not have been. introduced to the character or the gravitas of the situation, right? So, having said that, this book has more than 500 pages, and I just saw. Let me show you something interesting. So, this story, One for the Road, this is actually a sequel to the main story, and this one is, I think, this part is a prequel. Okay, so of course we have to start from chapter two in the next session. Okay, now, why, as I mentioned, that the story starts with a tall man and a boy who have been moving around in the on the land of the United States of America. They are just described as the tall man and the boy. Who they are, where do they belong to, and what has happened to them, we have no clue as of yet, right? But we understand that the tall man has something to do with publishing. Okay, the tall man has got to do something with publishing, and they were in Jerusalem's lot for some reason. The tall man and the boy. Okay, and there was a newspaper, right, which was talking about Jerusalem's lot being haunted, and many people moved away from the town, and some people were not even accounted for. They just vanished. What happened to them, we still don't know. Okay, and then the tall man was lying down, and there comes the reference of a glass paperweight. Okay, why am I mentioning the paperweight? Because the paperweight is also mentioned was talking when Ben was thinking about the insides of the Marston house. Okay, he also mentioned something about the paperweight. So maybe paperweight has got something to do with this story. Okay, and then when the prologue ends, we see that the main story is actually a flashback, right? This Ben thing, it starts as a flashback. The beginning totally deals with the tall man and the little boy. And as I mentioned in the last, when we started reading the book at first, there was one thing that actually caught my attention, and I would like to put it forward in front of you. Uh, Usually, like there was actually a conversation between the tall man and two of the priests of a particular church, right? And it was mentioned that the little boy had made some confessions. Okay, now when we talk about a confession made by a little boy, we usually don't believe that, usually in general cases we don't feel that they are going to be cataclysmic or really climactic, right? I mean, think about it. A little boy, what kind of a confession in general a little boy could make? Probably that he stole a particular Pokemon card from his friend, or maybe the fact that he used a bad word, right? Those could be their confessions. Usually, confession boxes in churches are made for adults. It is a way to vent out something that you cannot tell anyone else. And usually, when adults do confess in the confession box, they tend to shed a tear or two if they are not willing to get overwhelmed and cry all out, right? So, usually, crying in a confession box is meant for adults because adults have their own sets of problems which have cataclysmic and climactic consequences, right? So, those confessions are of huge gravitas. But if you think about it, what would a little boy have faced that in the confession box he starts crying? What kind of a relationship this little boy has with the tall man that, he says that, please don't leave me. He confesses that, he loves him, right? Of course, we are talking about a very, I don't know, sibling like love or some sort of a platonic love. Probably a father, probably the tall man is a father figure to the little boy, but still, any kind of love could be hard to confess, but the little boy does that. So, what kind of a relation does the little boy share with the tall man? What work the tall man does in the publishing business? And of course, what has happened to the residents of Jerusalem's lot who decided to move away from the city? And what has happened to those who were never seen after whatever happened at the town? Right? And of course, a glaring question still resides on the horizon. and that is, what were the tall man and the little boy doing at Jerusalem's lot? Then we start with Ben. The first chapter, when the prologue ends, we start with Ben. And we get to know that Ben is an adult and he had a wife, Miranda, and chances are that Miranda actually passed away in a motor accident, right? It was mentioned that when he was thinking of Miranda, he was thinking of yellow lights and vans, right? And all of a sudden, Miranda's voice going off. So that suggests that his wife passed away in an accident, right? So Ben Mears probably has, or Ben Mars, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but Ben has his own demons to fight. We are yet to know what demons we are talking about. But we get to know that Ben is not new to Jerusalem's lot. As he is entering the vicinity of this small hilly town in Maine, he remembers. He remembers the 4 years he had spent with his Aunt Cindy in this small town. Why was he spending 4 years in this town with his aunt? What happened to his parents? What did he do here? I mean, when he saw the Marston house, the, the dome of the house, he was scared, as if an old scar suddenly started burning again, right? So, what has happened? What does the Marston house represent? What is the Marston house doing in the middle of this town? And what is this hoopla about a paperweight? Ben talks about it, the tall man mentions it, and then Ben also mentions that he would like to take the Marston house for lease for a few days, and he could use the kitchen as the writing room. So chances are that Ben has a profession which requires him to write in one way or the other, right? He could be a copywriter, he could be an author, a screenwriter, anything, right? But his job requires him to write, and he plans to take the Marston house on lease and write in the kitchen. And he says that he's not going to go upstairs. Why? That is the question. What happened that he has decided that he's never going to go to the upstairs? We know that he has spent 4 years in this town and he has some sort of a trauma which is relevant and related to the Marston house. But why the upstairs? What makes him brave enough to stay in the to use the kitchen as a writing room, but why not upstairs? And what is the history of Marston House? And are we going to meet the people who probably disappeared, as mentioned in the prologue? Are we going to meet them in the flashback? Of course, we are going to meet them. What happened to them? What was their fate? All these questions await, right? Now, since we are talking about houses, before anyone chips in with their statement, I would like to share a small story. I actually planned to share this story on this year's spectacular nights. I didn't get a chance, but let me share it with you guys. Okay. So a friend of mine, and he is from an area near to my native place. Okay. Now, his sister, if you guys know Ash, you might know that he works at the post office. He's fresh out of the school and he's pursuing this degree and he works at the post office. Similar to that, my friend's sister is also a fresh graduate from high school, and apart from pursuing a degree in distance or something, I'm not sure, she's also an employee at a post office which is at my village. Okay, but she doesn't stay in my village. She stays at a nearby town. So this town is around an hour or 45 minutes away from my village, right? Now, you guys might not know, but let me write down the name of this town. So this is the town I'm talking about. Okay. So she stays there, and it is a small town. Okay, I mean, nowadays we have pizzerias over there, so of course it is growing. If you consider Uh, okay, you've heard of it. So, if you consider pizzerias to be the sign of growth, then I would like to say that it is growing. Okay. Now, the thing is that that little girl had a story to share, and she shared it with her to her brother. And the thing is that, so as I mentioned, she's a fresh graduate from high school, and she has started this job at my village, but she stays at an hour away. She stays at a place an hour away, and she stays in a PG. Okay, it's a ladies' PG, of course. College students or women who are employed at different places, they stay there. Okay. Now this little girl and she stays in a room alone. She has a whole room to herself. Now she's 18 or 19, probably your age, Shrikar, Balaji. She's of your age, probably younger than you guys. So she is staying in this PG, and when she moved there, it was not a big deal. But on a fateful night, after coming back from her work, after getting done with her evening supper, and then after her studies and all, she turned the light off and she was just lying down on her bed. Now, we all know that many a times when you're too tired, when you're exhausted, when you're drained, you feel like you will lie down and you'll fall asleep, but that doesn't happen, right? You tend to lie down, but sleep doesn't come. You're just tossing and turning, right? And that is what she was doing. That little girl was tossing and turning on the bed, not just because she was drained, but because of something else. You see, after her after she moved to this place, everything was fine. But on that particular night, she felt something was strange, something was off. Something was off on that particular night. Hello, Vikas. Thank you for joining. So, guys, those who don't know, Vikas is one of our newly recruited members of the council. He works in the editorial and documentation team where me, Shagun, and Harshu used to work. So, yeah, he's the second generation. So, thank you, Vikas, for joining. Now, coming back to the story. So, what happened that, as I mentioned, she was tossing and turning, and she was not feeling good. And all of a sudden, she decided to have some water. Okay, so she just turned around to get up, and at that moment she witnessed something. No problem, Vikas, no problem at all. This is probably your first session, although we are done with the reading. We are just having the discussion session, which I decided to start with a small story, which I wanted to share on Spectacular Nights, but alas. But no problem. Thank you for joining, and I hope next time you can join us on time, and you would be able to enjoy the narration and the story. Okay, by the way, we have restarted the book, Salem Slot. We have restarted it. So if you missed the first time, you can always start again. No problem at all. So she decided to get up, and just as she turned around to get up, she witnessed something that she had never expected in the 18 years of her life. Okay, the room was dark, and the only source of light was that orange beam from a street light outside her window. And that too was translucent because of the window pane. And in that weird concoction of darkness and orange light, she saw a little girl standing at the corner of her room, just where the door is. Next to the door, where the wall meets another part of the wall, at that corner, a little girl was standing. And she could make out that this figure is of a little girl. She was just standing there. And this girl, this like my friend's sister, For a few moments at the beginning, she could not process what is happening. But then it hit her. She lives alone in this room, and where did this little girl come from? And why is she standing there at the corner? And how long has she been here? And she couldn't do anything. She just, she was frozen. And she saw that the little girl was just standing there, not moving, nothing. My friend's sister, let's call her our own sister, she's as good as a sister. So that sister was so scared that what is she going to do if this silhouette from the corner takes a step forward, right? At that very moment, she decided that she's simply and slowly going to lie down, put the chadar, the bed sheet, on her face, and she'll just stay awake. She won't close her eyes, but she will cover her face and her whole body with the bed sheet. And she just kept on lying like that. She didn't sleep the whole night. Eventually, she could see that the orange light in the room was accompanied by a red light. The red light that we often see from the horizon at the beginning of the day and when the day ends. The sun was coming out, and when dawn broke, she gathered the courage and gently peeked out of the bed sheet, peeped out, and she saw that no one was standing there. She was awake the whole night. Now she was scared what she was going to do because once she was done with that day's job, she had to come back to this room and spend another night. And if everything goes well, probably spend a lot of nights here. But as fate would have wanted it, on that particular day, apparently, the post office was all of a sudden they decided the post office would stay closed because of some local festival. Okay, so she had to stay in the room, and coincidentally, on that particular day, and she was a new inhabitant of the PG. She was a new member of the PG family, and she didn't know that on that particular day, I mean the next day, uh, it was a get together of all the old people as in all the people who used to live in this PG. They were coming for a get together, and by this time she had a few friends in the PG as well. So the whole day she thought that okay, maybe she was exhausted, and you know what, maybe I had seen something, it was a hallucination or an illusion. Okay, so she decided to discard that thought. She was like, okay, this can't be true. I'm pretty sure I was exhausted. I have read too many ghost stories as a child, and this is affecting me. So yeah, let's just trash it out. Okay, and she decided to work with her PG mates, and she was, you know, she started arranging making arrangements for the upcoming get together, which was on the next day. Okay, and yeah, the whole day went, and she was busy and everything. She didn't tell anything to anyone. Okay, rather she was busy convincing herself that this was just a ruse played by my brain. This is not true. Ghosts are not real. If someone dies, they die. And then the night came. She was not sure if she should sleep with the lights on or the lights off. And she decided, you know what, let's turn the lights off. Nothing is going to happen. I should not be scared. She lied down. Next day was a normal holiday. Okay, it was a Sunday, Uh, the post office was suddenly closed on Saturday, and the next day was Sunday when the get together was supposed to happen. She was like, tomorrow is a holiday, people are coming, we are going to eat, it is going to be amazing and everything. And she was just scrolling her phone and all those things. And in an hour or two, she was like, you know what, I should sleep now. And just as she locked her phone and the phone light went off. So when you lock your screen, the light goes off, right? And just as she did, she saw the same girl standing at that very position. The room was dark, just like the last night. The only source of light was the street one, that orange beam barely making it into the darkness of the room. And in that weird eldritch combination of black and orange, she saw that little girl was standing still at that very point. And now she was terrified. She was not exhausted this night. She had a great day. And at that very moment, fear got the better of her. She somehow just and yeah, she was lucky that the switchboard was next to her bed, so she didn't have to get up or get out from the bed and then turn the light on. She just started banging on the switchboard so that the correct switch get turned on. And that happened very swiftly, and all of a sudden, the whole room, which was black and orange a moment ago, was bright as the neon lights are. And when the room was consumed with the bright white light, that girl was nowhere to be seen. She was gone. There was no one standing at the corner. But she knew that something is wrong. Something is off. If this thing is happening twice, that might mean either I'm going crazy for some reason, or maybe there's something that I don't know. Nobody told her that she was to share a room with an entity which is not living anymore. It was the second night that she would spend waking up. She kept on looking at that side of the wall, at that particular corner, and spent the whole night with her lights on, playing something on her phone, right? Watching comedy movies and all those things. But at the back of the mind, it was hitting her again and again like a hammer that look at the corner, look at the corner, look at the corner. And periodically, she was looking at the corner to ensure that no one is standing there. The second night also went out like that. And then came the day of the get together. The people, the ladies who used to live in this PG and eventually left, they came, they were well dressed, they brought gifts for the PG owner, an old lady who was very sweet with all her tenants. They had made really, really yummy food. Some of it was made, some of it was ordered. It was a grand feast. But although she was laughing and smiling with everyone, old and new, in the back of her head, she knew that she had to spend another night in that room. Because let's be honest, guys, in today's day and time, you can't probably modify your living or the place you are living in by saying that there's a ghost in there. Nobody would believe you. Rather, it would affect your job. And trust me, my father was in Air Force. I know how many secrets are kept. People are not allowed to say things, especially in a profession where you might have to hold a gun. But in post office, you don't have to hold a gun, but still, it is a responsibility. You have to handle a lot of cash. You have to deal with a lot of paperwork. A straight mindset, a rational mind is required. They need a problem solver, right? They don't need someone who sees a little girl at the corner of the room each night. Then there was this. I have something happy to say. I will say that after the meet of it. Okay, okay, sure, 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 sure. I won't take much time. Now, now comes the interesting part. Among all these old members of the PG, there was one lady who once, they were all sitting together and everything, right? And at the dining room and everything. So this girl, this lady, just shushed everyone down, and she was like, "Hey, who's living in room number so and so?" And my friend's sister was like, "I am." And this lady, she was like, "Did you see something there?" And now it struck my friend's sister that, okay, what is she talking about? Did she face the same thing in case she was living there, or maybe a friend of hers used to live in the same room and they felt something? So initially, my friend's sister was like, no, I didn't see anything or feel anything. Then this lady was like, are you sure you didn't see a little girl standing at the corner? And when this lady was so specific and precise about the description, my friend's sister could not hold back anymore. She was like, Didi, I was just being skeptic so that, I didn't want to come off as a fool in front of everyone. But for the last 2 nights, I have seen this little girl standing at that very corner that you mentioned, and she does nothing. She just keeps on standing there. And then that Didi and some of the other old PG members, they told them that before this house was bought by this old lady who runs the PG now, there lived a family in this house. And this man suspected that his wife was having an affair. Was she or was she not? I'm not sure. I don't know. But he suspected that she was having an affair. And in rage, he killed her. Not only did he kill her, he killed their only daughter as well. And then he ended his own life. And apparently, that particular room was where they used to live. That was their bedroom before the reconstruction. And yeah, so this is how the story ends. My friend's sister and a few other PG friends of hers have done some puja and all in that room, and apparently afterwards, nothing happened. She never witnessed anything, and I think now another girl has moved in the same room, so there are two people. Okay, and there has been no such incident as of now where these two girls felt that the third member of the house or the third member of the room has arrived and is standing at the corner. But the thing is that since we are talking about Marston House, and this is something that we also talked about in the first reading session of Salem's Lot, that houses by themselves hold a lot of secrets. They hold a lot of stories. See, you don't have to believe in ghosts. I personally don't believe in the supernatural. I'm pretty sure everything has an explanation. We just don't know how to explain it. But at the same time, one cannot deny the fact that despite being inanimate, despite being, you know, made and constructed brick by brick, despite being a building, a house witnesses a lot of things. And maybe, see, we live in an infinite universe with an infinite possibilities, right? So maybe there's a possibility that some of these memories and some of the things that a house witnesses, some of these things are etched into the aura or vibe of the house, right? So who knows? Maybe my friend's sister was just hallucinating, and maybe the previous girls who used to live in that room, probably they hallucinated as well. I mean, it is more probable that more than one people would hallucinate about the same thing rather than, a dead person coming back. But then again, guys, we are all part of a very small community in a very small solar system, in a very small galaxy. We don't know what is out there. And maybe, just maybe, houses do whisper. Maybe houses do have memories. And when those memories solidify, we call them phantoms, we call them specters, we call them ghosts. So, Marston House is one such character rather than just being a building in Salem's lot. And I'm pretty sure that if we read the book diligently, rather than missing any single session, I'm pretty sure that this book is going to scar us in more than one ways. I know what the book is about because I've read it previously, and I really, from the bottom, from the cellars of my heart, I want that you guys have the same feeling. When the book ends, you'll be like, "What did I just read?" Because the trope is an old one, but the twists and the presentation is very different. It is very Stephen Kingy, very Stephen King-esque, if per se. So yeah, I blabbered a lot because there's not a lot to talk about, not a lot to discuss about in these particular uh, first few pages. We have read till page number 29, Berlin. We have to start with chapter 2. So if you want to read it, start from prologue and end at the point where chapter 2 starts. Okay, here, Susan. It's a beautiful book. Okay, guys. So I guess, does anyone have anything to add, or we can wrap up for tonight? I guess nobody has anything to add to the discussion because there's not much to discuss. We have just come across a few characters and their fate. We don't know who the tall man is. We don't know who's the little boy, and we are yet to know who Ben is or would be. But we do know that Marston House is holding a lot of secrets. And yes, let's not forget about that small glass paperweight. Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for joining the session. I'll stop the recording now. And if you see something in your room at night,
No, that's enough. That's enough.
okay, okay.
Actually, I am scared, Satyaki. Seriously.
You're welcome.